10 years. That's how long I believed I was building a future with the man I loved. I thought every compromise, every late night helping his family, every dream I put on hold was an investment in us. But the moment I told him I no longer wanted marriage, his love twisted into punishment. He didn't argue. He didn't cry. He tried to rob me blind, selling off the very furniture I bought. And in that instant I realized, trust wasn't my strength. It was his weapon. For most of my 20s, I thought I knew exactly what my life would look like. I'd marry the man I was with, settle into a home, maybe even raise kids. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, and stability was all I wanted. From the outside, it probably looked like we were on track, 10 years together, 4 of them living under the same roof. People assumed we were already married. They'd slip in little comments at family gatherings. "When's the wedding?" And I'd smile, pretending I wasn't tired of waiting. Because the truth was I had been waiting for years. Waiting for him to be ready. Waiting for the perfect moment. Waiting for a proposal that never came. Every time I asked, he'd tell me he loved me. That he was just waiting until he could give me the proposal I deserved. For a while I believed him. I even convinced myself that maybe I was too controlling for wanting it sooner. That was his favorite word, controlling. Anytime I pushed back, anytime I reminded him of what we'd agreed on, that label would come out. It stung, but I bit my tongue. When we moved in together, I told myself it was progress. But 6 months into sharing a home, I realized something unsettling. I wasn't happy. Not miserable, just flat. Like a roommate with benefits. But I clung to the idea of marriage, telling myself it was just around the corner. That once we crossed that threshold, everything would feel different. Then therapy happened. 2 years of sitting in a chair and unraveling the knots I had tied myself into. Somewhere in those sessions I had an epiphany. I wanted a wedding more than I wanted a marriage. And when I let that sink in, when I admitted that truth to myself, something in me felt lighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting on him. I was free to focus on me, my career, my goals, my peace. So I stopped babysitting his nieces and nephews. I stopped bending my schedule around his family's needs. I texted his mom and brother, told them they had 3 weeks before I bowed out completely. I thought it was reasonable, responsible even. But to him it was betrayal. He said family meant sacrifice, that one day those kids would be my family too. That's when I dropped the real bomb. I no longer wanted marriage. The silence that followed was deafening. His eyes hardened, his jaw clenched. To him, my choice wasn't about me, it was a rejection of him. He couldn't see it any other way. And in that moment I knew. Everything between us was about to change. The first cracks showed up quietly. Like hairline fractures in glass you don't notice until the whole pane shatters. After I told him I no longer wanted marriage, he didn't scream or storm out. He just shifted. The first night, he slept in the spare bedroom. The second, he forgot to send me his half of the streaming bill. A payment he always made without issue. Little things easy to brush off, but they stacked up. I remember standing in the kitchen one evening, cooking dinner like always, when I realized he wasn't talking to me. Not ignoring me in a dramatic way, just moving around me like I was invisible. His phone lit up constantly, his thumbs moving faster than usual. I caught a glimpse of names I didn't recognize. Friends of his, I assumed. I told myself not to spiral. After all, wasn't I the one who had shifted the terms of our relationship? Didn't I owe him some grace while he processed? But then came Valentine's week. He walked into the living room with that practiced smile. The one he used when he wanted me to believe something. He actually apologized for how he'd acted. Said he wanted to make it up to me, that he had something special planned for the weekend. For a split second I felt hope. Maybe we were finally turning a corner. Maybe even without marriage we could reset. On Saturday I woke up to the smell of coffee and pancakes. A sweet gesture, though he wasn't there to share it. Instead, a text buzzed in, work emergency. Meet me at the theater at 3. I didn't panic. He worked unpredictable hours, so I figured it made sense. But at 2:55, as I stood outside the theater waiting, another text came in. Sorry, typo. Meant 5. My chest tightened. He'd done this before. Fat-fingered texts, accidental calls. I brushed it off. Killed time at an outlet mall nearby. By 5, I was back in front of the theater. Another text. Still stuck at work. Let's push to 7. That was the moment my stomach dropped. Once is clumsy. Twice is suspicious. 3 times? That's a plan. But instead of calling him out, I sent back a thumbs up emoji and a smiling selfie from one of my favorite stores. I wanted him to believe I was distracted. In reality, I was driving home. The sun was sinking low when I pulled into our complex. A moving truck blocked part of the lot. Nothing unusual, people moved in and out all the time this time of year. But then I saw them. His friends. Sweating, hauling out my couch. The one I had picked, paid for, and cherished. My pulse spiked, hands trembling on the steering wheel. And then I saw him. My boyfriend of 10 years, laughing as he helped carry my bookshelf toward a pickup. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't carelessness. It wasn't miscommunication. This was betrayal in its purest form. But that was just the beginning of my nightmare. I froze in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles went white. For a moment I thought maybe I was hallucinating. Maybe it wasn't my bookshelf, maybe it wasn't my couch. But then I saw the sticker still on the back panel, the one from the store where I bought it. There was no mistaking it. I rolled down the window just enough to breathe. My chest tightened with every laugh I heard from his little crew of friends. They were acting like it was just another Saturday project, helping a buddy move. None of them seemed to realize, or maybe they didn't care, that the things they were loading up weren't his to take. I grabbed my phone. My thumb hovered over his contact, but I stopped myself. Calling him now would only tip him off. Instead, I dialed the police. My voice cracked as I explained. There's a moving truck outside my apartment. My boyfriend and his friends are taking my furniture. I paid for it, I have the receipts. I need someone here now. The dispatcher's calm tone was almost surreal. She told me to stay in the car until officers arrived. I tried. God, I tried. But when I saw him pick up my dining chairs, the same ones we had shared countless dinners on, something in me snapped. I threw the car door open and marched toward him. What the hell do you think you're doing? My voice came out sharper than I expected. He froze, eyes wide for just a second, then narrowed. I'm moving out, he said flatly, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. With my stuff. I snapped back. He smirked. We lived here together. Half of this is mine. No, I shot back, shaking now. I bought this. Every couch cushion, every lamp, every spice jar in that kitchen. You didn't pay a dime. One of his friends muttered something about me, overreacting. That word made my stomach churn. Overreacting. The word he always used when he wanted me to feel small, irrational. Then I saw it, my blender, shoved into a box like it was worthless. My dad had given it to me when I first moved out on my own. My throat tightened, eyes stinging. It wasn't about the appliance. It was about the audacity. He was trying to erase me piece by piece, starting with the things I loved. Before I could say another word, the flashing red and blue lights pulled into the lot. Relief and dread hit me all at once. The officers stepped out, scanning the scene. I hurried to meet them, receipts already pulled up on my phone. But when they spoke, their words chilled me. Since you two live together, this might be considered a civil matter. Civil matter? He was stealing from me in broad daylight, and they wanted to call it civil. My pulse roared in my ears. I realized then, this was going to be much harder than I thought, and what I discovered next would confirm my worst fears. Standing there in the parking lot, with flashing lights bouncing off the moving truck, I felt like I had stepped into someone else's nightmare. The officer spoke to him first, and I could see the performance starting. His practiced shrug, his calm voice, his hands spread as if to say, what's the big deal? He painted the picture of a breakup, of shared belongings, of a man simply taking his half. But I wasn't about to let him turn my life into his stage play. I pulled up my email receipts one by one, scrolling furiously. That couch? Paid for on this date with my card. That bookshelf? Same thing. The dining set? Bought it while he was unemployed. Every big purchase mine. My voice was shaking, but my hands trembled so badly I could barely hold the phone steady. The officer glanced at me, then back at him. Do you dispute this? His jaw tightened. We've lived together for years. Everything is shared. Shared. The word made me nauseous. Shared meant mutual contribution, compromise. But the truth? He hadn't contributed more than a token here and there. Half the time, I paid rent while he floated excuses about hours being cut or unexpected expenses. Shared was his camouflage. The police, clearly uncomfortable, muttered about this being a civil issue again, advising us to work it out. My stomach dropped. Work it out? With a man who had just tried to sell my bookshelf to his buddy in broad daylight? And then the kicker. When one officer casually mentioned the buyer might have rights if money had already exchanged hands. My blood ran cold. He had sold my furniture. Not borrowed. Not confused. Sold. That was the undeniable proof. My chest heaved, air too sharp, too shallow. The realization hit like a fist. This wasn't just a breakup. This was punishment. He hadn't sat down to talk, hadn't chosen to walk away clean. No, he wanted me to suffer, to come home to an empty apartment, stripped of every comfort I had built with my own money. And the worst part? He was enjoying it. The glint in his eyes as I tried to defend myself wasn't guilt. It was satisfaction. He wanted to see me unravel. I managed to choke out the words. If any of this leaves in that truck, I'll press charges. Every single one of you. My voice cracked, but the fury beneath it was real. He sneered, muttering to his friends about me being crazy. But he stopped moving boxes. That moment told me everything I needed. I had leverage, but only if I played this right. I went to the station the next day, receipts in hand, and begged for help. A female officer listened, really listened, and guided me on filing the paperwork. It wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was about a paper trail, about proving who I was up against. And as I listed the missing items, mattress, lamps, even groceries, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just theft. It was war. And I wasn't ready for what I was about to discover next. The day after filing my complaint, I walked into the apartment and the silence hit me harder than any argument ever had. The living room looked like a half-finished set. Couch cushions missing, lamps gone, gaps where furniture had once stood. Even the dining table where we'd shared every meal was stripped bare. It was like someone had reached inside my life and carved out pieces of it, leaving jagged holes behind. I thought I had seen the worst of it in the parking lot. I was wrong. As I walked into the kitchen, my stomach twisted. Shelves were empty. Not just the blender and coffee maker, spices, canned food, bags of pasta. Even the box of tea my mom had given me last Christmas was gone. I opened the fridge. Half the groceries had vanished. He didn't just want to move out, he wanted to gut the space, to leave me staring at emptiness where comfort used to be. Then I stepped into the bedroom. My mattress was missing. Not just the mattress pad or the sheets, the entire mattress. The frame sat there naked like a skeleton. For a second I just stood there, numb. And then I laughed, this hollow, bitter laugh. Who steals a mattress? Someone who wants you to suffer every single night afterward. That's who. I dropped onto the box spring, heart pounding. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about the stuff. It was about control. He wanted to rewrite the ending of our relationship so that I wasn't the one walking away free. I was the one crawling, broken, stripped of dignity. That's when I noticed the envelopes on the dresser. At first, I thought maybe he'd left me a note, some pathetic justification. But when I opened them, my stomach dropped again. They weren't letters. They were copies of our lease correspondence. He had been trying to get his name removed from the contract behind my back, without proper notice, without ever speaking to me. If it had worked, I would have been left financially responsible for everything, blindsided. And it clicked. The moving truck wasn't the whole scheme. It was part of a bigger plan. He hadn't just wanted to take my furniture. He wanted to take stability itself. Leave me paying rent alone with no bed, no food, no table to sit at. He wasn't walking away. He was detonating the whole life we had built, leaving me in the rubble. I remember gripping those papers so tight they wrinkled, my hands shaking. My therapist's voice echoed in my head. Patterns of control don't end when relationships do. They escalate. She was right. This wasn't just petty anger. It was escalation. And if I didn't protect myself now, he'd take even more. That night I couldn't sleep. Lying on that box spring, staring at the ceiling, I kept hearing his voice. Family means sacrifice. He used to say it like a mantra, but now it twisted in my mind. Sacrifice had always meant my sacrifice. And now he wanted to make sure I had nothing left to give. This went so much deeper than I ever thought. That night on the bare box spring, I felt like the walls of the apartment were pressing in on me. Every empty shelf, every hollow corner was a reminder of what he'd taken, and of how easily he thought he could erase me. My body ached with exhaustion, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. Do I fight back? Do I let it go? One voice in my head whispered, "You'll look petty if you drag this out. People will think you're bitter." That was the same voice he had planted in me for years, the one that made me doubt my own boundaries. But another voice, stronger, sharper, rose up this time. "He tried to rob you in broad daylight. He laughed while doing it. He doesn't get to walk away clean." I thought about calling him, about demanding my things back, but I already knew how that would go. He'd twist it. He'd tell his friends I was crazy, just like he had in the parking lot. He'd gaslight me until I questioned what I'd seen with my own eyes. No, talking to him wasn't an option anymore. Instead, I sat up and pulled out my laptop. I opened folders, dug through email receipts, pieced together a timeline. Each confirmation email, each invoice was like a brick in the wall I was building between us. Evidence. Proof. My armor. By 2 a.m., I had a digital file thicker than most legal briefs. But even with evidence, the fear lingered. What if the police still brushed me off? What if the courts didn't care? What if he came back while I was gone and took what little was left? Every creak in the hallway made me tense, imagining him with another set of friends, ready for round two. That's when the doubt crept in. Maybe I should just walk away. Move out, start fresh, buy new furniture. Wasn't peace worth more than revenge? But then I pictured my dad's face when he handed me that blender. The nights I spent saving to afford the couch I'd wanted for years. The mattress I had chosen after weeks of back pain. Those weren't just objects. They were pieces of me, my labor, my love, my life. And he had tried to sell them like they were trash. I couldn't let that stand. So I made a plan. I'd go back to the female officer who had actually listened. I'd escalate with my landlord, document every single conversation. If the legal route failed, I'd at least create a paper trail so he couldn't spin the story into his version of events. And in the meantime, I'd quietly prepare to leave the apartment. Not because he had won, but because I refused to live in a battlefield. It wasn't easy. Some nights I lay awake, my stomach in knots, wondering if I had the strength for this fight. But every time I wavered, I remembered the look on his face as he carried my bookshelf. That smug little smirk, like I was powerless. No, I wasn't powerless. I was just getting started. I spent sleepless nights planning. Finally, I knew what I had to do. The following week, I walked into the police station with my folder of evidence. My hands were clammy, my stomach twisted into knots, but I forced myself to keep my head high. This time I wasn't asking them to believe me, I was showing them. Receipts, timestamps, product codes. A paper trail so clear even he couldn't weasel his way around it. The female officer from before recognized me instantly. "You're back," she said, her voice steady, almost reassuring. I slid the folder across her desk. Everything he tried to take. Everything I bought. My voice cracked, but I didn't let it falter. She flipped through the papers, nodding as she scanned. "This is solid. You've done more than most people would." For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief. She explained how I could file charges, how the civil court could demand compensation, how the act of selling my things could qualify as theft. It was the first time the system felt like it might actually be on my side. Walking out of that station, folder tucked back under my arm, I felt lighter. Like maybe, just maybe, I could breathe again. I even stopped for coffee on the way home, a small luxury I hadn't allowed myself in days. Back at the apartment, I started reclaiming little pieces of my life. I bought a cheap air mattress to replace the one he'd stolen, picked up groceries, restocked my shelves. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like progress. A small step toward normalcy. And then the strangest thing happened, he reached out. A text popped up late one night. I overreacted. I shouldn't have taken things that weren't mine. "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, heart hammering. Part of me wanted to delete it, to block his number and never give him another ounce of my time. But another part, stubborn, curious, wondered if this was it. If maybe, after all the chaos, he was finally ready to admit what he'd done. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet in a public place. A coffee shop we used to visit when we were still good. He showed up looking tired, almost sheepish. "I messed up," he said quickly, before I could even sit down. "I was angry and I wanted to hurt you. But I went too far." For a moment I almost believed him. The sincerity in his voice, the way his shoulders slumped, it was the version of him I used to love. He even promised to return some of the smaller things, swearing he'd make it right. I walked out of that cafe thinking maybe this nightmare was ending. That with legal action in motion and his half-hearted apology, I could finally close the chapter. But as I turned the key in the apartment door that evening, I felt it, the silence heavier than before. And then I saw it. Another empty space where something had been that morning. He hadn't stopped. He had doubled down. I thought it was over. I couldn't have been more wrong. The first thing I noticed was the coffee table. That battered oak table I'd bought secondhand and sanded down myself. It was gone. My stomach dropped as my eyes scanned the room. The TV stand too. Even the small lamp I kept by the window. More holes carved into my life. I stumbled back against the wall, my heart pounding. I had just met him. He had just apologized. He'd looked me in the eyes and said he wanted to make it right. And while I was replaying his words in my head, clinging to the hope that maybe we could end things without more damage, he had slipped back into the apartment and taken more. The betrayal burned hotter than before, because this time I'd let my guard down. I wanted to believe him, and he used that as cover to gut what little was left. I called him immediately. My voice shook with rage. You said you'd stop. You said you'd make it right. And you stole more from me. He didn't even flinch. His tone was flat, almost amused. I didn't steal. I took what was mine. If you think otherwise, prove it. Prove it. The words echoed like a taunt. That's what this was about for him. Not the furniture, not the lease, not even the breakup. It was a game. A power play. And in his mind he was still winning. I hung up before my fury turned into begging. Then I did what he never expected. I marched straight back to the police station. My folder was heavier now. Thicker with updated photos, timestamps, fresh receipts printed out. The female officer looked at me like she'd been waiting for this moment. You need to file charges, she said firmly. Not just threats. Real charges. So I did. Theft. Fraud. Harassment. I put it all on paper, and for the first time I felt the tide shift. He could deny, he could twist, but now there was an official record. Now it wasn't just my word against his smirk. But that didn't mean it was over. Because 2 days later, I got a call from my landlord. He sounded irritated, almost accusatory. Your boyfriend says he's been trying to get off the lease for weeks. Why didn't you tell me you were assuming full rent? I froze. Because I didn't agree to that, I shot back. The landlord sighed. Well, he's been persistent. Says you're dragging your feet. If you can't cover the full amount, we may need to start looking at new tenants. My blood went cold. Not only was he trying to rob me blind, but now he was threatening my housing. He wasn't content with furniture. He wanted to destabilize everything. That night, sitting on the floor of my half-empty apartment, I realized the stakes had grown beyond furniture, beyond money. He was trying to push me out of my home, to corner me until I broke. What happened next made me question everything I thought I knew about him, and about myself. I sat cross-legged on the floor, staring at the emptiness around me. The apartment echoed in ways it never had before. Every sound magnified by the things that weren't there anymore. No table. No chairs. No lamps to soften the shadows. Just me, the hum of the fridge, and the low buzz of panic running through my veins. I tried to sleep on the air mattress I'd bought, but every creak from the hallway made me bolt upright, convinced he'd come back again. I kept the lights on, as if brightness alone could ward him off. My mind replayed his smug words. Prove it. It didn't matter that I had receipts, police reports, photos. He still held power because he had taken pieces of my life I couldn't replace. My sense of safety, my home, my trust. The worst part? A small, shameful voice whispered that maybe I'd brought this on myself. I had been the one to say I didn't want marriage anymore. I had been the one to shift the rules. Maybe this was punishment for changing my mind, for taking back control after years of waiting. That thought made me sick, but it lingered, eating at me in the silence. One night, I curled up on the bare floor after the air mattress gave out, tears soaking into my sleeves. I hated myself for crying over furniture, for letting him reduce me to this fragile state. But it wasn't just furniture, it was the principle. It was 10 years of my life rewritten into a story where he got the last word. My therapist's voice came back to me in fragments. Abusers escalate when they lose control. Patterns repeat until you break them. You're not overreacting. You're reclaiming yourself. I clung to those words like a lifeline, but still the fear sat heavy in my chest. I pictured walking into court, him standing there with that same smirk, spinning lies about me being unstable, dramatic, vindictive. What if the judge believed him? What if no one cared? For the first time in years, I felt completely alone. Even his family, the ones I had babysat for, stayed silent. No calls, no texts, not even a thank you for the years I'd sacrificed for their kids. Their silence was its own betrayal. It all came crashing down one morning when I found a notice slipped under my door. A reminder about rent. Not late yet, but a warning. My landlord's message was clear. If I didn't keep up, I'd be the one out. I sank to the floor with that paper in my hands, shaking so hard I could barely read it. In that moment, I felt stripped of everything, my security, my voice, my worth. But somewhere in the middle of that breakdown, a spark flickered. A thought so clear it cut through the fog. He wants me broken. He wants me to quit. If I give in now, he wins forever. I wiped my face, crumpled the paper in my fist, and stood up. I realized what I had to do to end this once and for all. The morning of the hearing, I woke up before dawn. My hands shook as I buttoned my blouse, but underneath the nerves, there was something else. Resolve. For weeks I'd been cornered, stripped of comfort, pushed into silence. But this was my chance to put everything on record, to strip him of the power he thought he owned. The courtroom was smaller than I imagined, almost ordinary, but the weight of it pressed down on me as soon as I stepped inside. He was already there, leaning back in his chair like it was a casual meeting. That smirk, God, that smirk, spread across his face when he saw me. His friends weren't there, but I knew they'd been part of it. And he wanted me to remember that. When the judge entered, the room shifted. Formal, serious, no room for games. I clutched my folder of evidence so tightly my knuckles went white. Receipts, photos, police reports, even screenshots of messages. My lifeline. He went first. His voice was smooth, rehearsed. He painted himself as the wronged partner, the man blindsided by a girlfriend who changed her mind after 10 years. He claimed we had bought things together. That I was exaggerating, that I was just being vindictive because I didn't want to get married anymore. For a moment my stomach lurched. He sounded believable. Too believable. I caught the judge glancing at him, then back at me, and panic clawed at my throat. What if this whole thing backfired? Then it was my turn. I stood, knees weak but voice steady. I laid out the evidence one piece at a time. Dates, order numbers, my bank statement showing every large purchase. Photos of my apartment before and after. The police report documenting the moving truck. When I mentioned the blender my dad had given me, my voice cracked, not because of its value, but because of what it symbolized. And for the first time I saw the judge lean forward, listening closely. I ended with the simplest truth. Your Honor, this isn't about things. This is about punishment. He wanted me to come home to nothing. He wanted me broken. But I won't let him write that ending for me. The silence that followed was deafening. Then the judge spoke. His words blurred in my ears, but the message landed clear. Restitution. He had to pay me back for what he'd taken or sold. He had until November, or further legal action would follow. I exhaled so hard it felt like my chest collapsed. He sat there, jaw tight, the smirk finally gone. That was my victory. Not just the judgment, but the crack in his facade. For once he didn't look untouchable. He looked cornered. As I walked out of that courtroom, sunlight hit my face. My legs still trembled, but I felt taller somehow. Stronger. The weight he tried to chain me with had shifted back onto his shoulders. Finally, the scales had balanced. And I'll never forget the look in his eyes when he realized he'd lost. Walking out of that courthouse felt like stepping into a different life. For months I had been trapped in his cycle, waiting for the next blow, the next empty space in my apartment, the next cruel twist. But now, for the first time in years, the silence around me wasn't suffocating. It was freeing. I moved out of that apartment within weeks. I didn't want to live in walls that echoed with his betrayal. I found a smaller place, modest but mine alone. When I unpacked the few belongings he hadn't touched, I felt an odd sense of gratitude. Those objects weren't just furniture anymore. They were survivors, reminders that I wasn't erased no matter how hard he had tried. My dad came over one weekend with an envelope. Inside was the money he had been quietly saving for my wedding someday. Use it for something real. he said simply. And I did. That down payment turned into the beginnings of my own house. A place where every corner would be chosen by me, paid for by me, safe because of me. Work shifted too. The certification I had been studying for, the one I once thought I didn't have time for, finally paid off. Promotion. Higher pay. Independence I had been starving for but never fully believed I could claim. It felt poetic. He had tried to strip me down to nothing, and instead I rose higher than I ever imagined. And yet, there are nights I still lie awake and think about the look on his face as he carried my bookshelf. That smug certainty that he had won. It's not the missing furniture that haunts me. It's the audacity, the sheer arrogance of believing he could reduce me to rubble and walk away clean. But those thoughts don't break me anymore. They fuel me. Because I know the truth. He didn't win. He lost me. From what I've heard, he has a new girlfriend now. Maybe she believes the same promises I once did. That he just needs the right time. Maybe she's already ignoring the little red flags, the digs he disguises as jokes. I don't envy her. I only hope she learns faster than I did. As for me, I no longer dream about weddings. I don't need a ring or a piece of paper to define my worth. What I want now is peace, freedom, and the kind of love that doesn't come with conditions or punishments. And if that love never arrives, I know I'll be okay. Because I have myself. So here's what I've learned. Sometimes the end of a relationship isn't heartbreak. Sometimes it's liberation disguised as loss. Sometimes you need to watch everything you thought you built get torn apart, just to realize you were standing on stronger ground than you ever believed. And if anyone listening to this finds themselves where I once was, waiting, doubting, second-guessing, remember this. You don't need someone else's permission to reclaim your life. What would you have done in my place? Walked away quietly or fought back the way I did? When I look back, it's almost surreal how close I came to letting him rewrite my story. If I had stayed silent, if I had accepted the police brushing me off, if I had told myself it's just furniture, I would have carried his version of events forever. Instead, I fought back. And that fight didn't just return what he stole. It gave me something bigger. Proof that I could stand on my own. That's the part one hopes sticks with you. We don't always get to choose the betrayals life throws at us. But we do get to choose whether we let them define us or propel us forward. Sometimes the very moment someone tries to break you is the moment you realize how unbreakable you really are. So what would you do if you came home to find someone you trusted trying to strip your life away? Would you walk? Would you fight? Or would you find another way to reclaim your peace? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if stories like this hit home for you, stick around. Subscribe, share, and join us here, where every twist has meaning and every ending earns its weight.